Hello there and welcome to this Napoleonic battle report. So this is part 3 of a mini campaign that I'm running called 8 Hours of the 100 Days. And for those of you who've watched the previous 2 episodes, basically I'm using this campaign as an opportunity, an incentive to paint up some units and models that I've got sitting around in boxes that I need to do, but start building up my Napoleonics collection. And I'm trying to build through to a final grand battle as I start to paint up units. And for each part of the campaign, I'm painting up some new units to take part in that particular episode. So this is part 3, and in part 3, the French, this is one of their supply depots along the route to Quatre Bras, and as you can see, they've got some nice juicy supplies in there. And basically, the Allied commander has sent out a raiding force consisting of the 2nd Light King's German Legion, so a company from the 2nd Light KGL, been sent out to try and disrupt the supplies here, also supported by some Brunswick Jaegers. So I'll go through some of the scenario rules as we go through the game, but basically the KGL have got to try and get to the supplies, set some fuses and blow them up basically to claim a victory. And the French have got to try and hold off the KGL. So I'll go over to the forces now and we can see who's taking part. So here are the Allied forces for today's battle report. So on the right here we've got a company from the King's German Legion from the 2nd Light KGL. And on the left here we've got some Brunswick Jaegers supporting the KGL. Now these Jaegers turned up in the last battle report, if you've watched that one in part 2. And they're a little bit delayed turning up here, so they won't be getting here till turn 3. They've been delayed following their skirmish with the 13th Leger in the woods, and the KGL will be starting the game from turn 1. So as I said at the start of the video, that I'm using this campaign as an incentive to paint up models. So this is what I've painted for today's game. This is the KGL which I picked up as part of the La Haye-Saint battle set from Warlord Games. These are all metal miniatures. Really nice individual models. Really happy how these have turned out. A very similar paint scheme to what I did for the 95th Rifles. They've got very similar kind of green tunics, etc. They've got grey trousers, those slight differences around the trousers and some of the belts, etc. But very similar to the 95th. But I think they're going to add a really nice bit of flavour to my Allied force for the final battle. And they're commanded by Major von Behring. So as with the previous 2 episodes, these will be operated in basically groups of 4, and it basically represents the company in skirmish order, and each 4 models represents a small unit within that, and the same for the Jaegers as well. Okay, so hopefully that's a decent look at what I've been painting, and so we'll go over to the French. So this is the first part of the French force for today's battle report. So this basically represents a company from one of the line battalions that's guarding the rear areas, looking after the baggage train and the supplies as they brought up to the front lines where the main force is attacking at Quatre Bras. So they're not particularly the best quality troops. However, don't hold that against them. They've still got muskets and bayonets, and they still love their country and their emperor, so they're prepared to fight, but compared to the elite forces that are coming, these aren't as well trained. However, and also these are from my existing collection as well. So the exciting part about the French force though is over here on the left. So here we have some hussars, and again I've painted these for this battle report, so again part of the incentive for doing this campaign was to paint some new forces. So I've got my 1st regiment of hussars, these are the 7th hussars. These are all Perry miniatures. This is from their plastics range. And I was really excited to get some cavalry into the campaign at this stage on the 3rd part. So these will be supporting the French line troops. Not all of them, because I think it'd be too powerful. So basically I'm just going to have 2 stands coming on, and this represents some hussars who are patrolling up and down the roads, just checking for any incursions, etc. So they'll be arriving from turn 4. So the KGL and the Brunswick need to do their work as quick as they can, because obviously the last thing skirmishing infantry like is cavalrymen. So yeah, yeah, really enjoyed painting these. It's nice to get some cavalry out into the campaign. I will do some more an update video on my painting and give you a bit of a closer look at these, but excited to get these on the table. Okay, so let's go over to turn. We'll go over to deployment next. Okay, so the units have deployed. So for the French garrison, the company is formed up outside the base where the supplies are. So for the rules for this game is because they're a kind of low grade, poor quality troops really, they're not allowed to venture more than 6 inches from the footprint of the building, and that kind of represents they've got limited orders. They're all, as in with the previous 2 games, that each stand will be operating independently, and they've all got a command rating of 7. There's no commander or officer on the field, although we assume one's kind of around. So there's no one to rally off any casualties. So if one of these becomes shaken, then they're going to remain shaken for the rest of the game. And again, trying to reflect the fact that they're kind of the rear guard, really. The KGL for the Allies are deployed on the eastern side of the board. So the company's split down into 4 groups of 4. So we've got a unit there, 2 in the centre with von Behring, and then 1 on the right flank of that line there. So in terms of von Behring himself, he's got a command rating of 8. So all these units, again, have a command rating of 8. He can actually rally, so he can rally any of his units that's within 12 inches of him. So gives him a bit of advantage there if he needs to. In terms of the game itself, turn 3, the Brunswick Jaegers will come down from the north here, on the road here, and from turn 4, the French Hussars will arrive from the southern edge of the board here on the road. In terms of game victory conditions, so what we've got here is basically the Allies have got to get to the supplies, either of the 2 stacks there, and at the start of the turn, or their turn, if they're in base contact with either one of these stacks of supplies and they're unengaged, so not in hand-to-hand combat, and also not disordered, they can attempt to light a fuse to their explosives. So you need a 4+ a 4-up roll on a D6 to ignite the fuse. So that's their goal. And the game will last a maximum of 7 turns. In terms of victory conditions, very, very straightforward in this one. If you've watched the previous games I've had, you've got major victories, minor victories or losses, and that goes towards the campaign result, which I'll do at the end of the battle report. For this particular battle, it's either win or lose. Either the Allies manage to destroy the supplies, and that's a major victory, or the French manage to stop them doing so, and that's a major victory for them. However, there is a potential for either side to wipe each other out or destroy each other. So again, if either side destroy each other, then that's also a major victory. So no minor victories in this one. It's win or lose at all costs. Okay, so we'll go over to first turn for the Allies. Okay, so that's the end of movement, Allied movement on turn 1. Just to confirm some of the game rules as well. So if you've watched the previous 2 games, I've reduced ranges for movement and shooting down to 2/3 from the black powder standard. And also, in terms of the units themselves, I'm using the statistics from the Albion Triumphant Volume 2 100 Days Campaign Supplement from Warlord Games. So these are all classed as small units, and I'll confirm some of their other attributes as we go along. In terms of orders, so you order each unit individually, as I said. However, if you do fail an order, you can still then order the other units in your command. Otherwise, the game would take too long, basically. And but if you blunder an order, your unit becomes disordered. Okay, so that's the basic game rules we've got. In terms of how the Allies fared, well, the left flank pretty much stalled, so this unit didn't move. This centre unit didn't move either, failed their order. Von Behring managed to get down towards the hedgerow, and that hedgerow will provide some cover for them. If you're in base contact, you will get a morale save modifier, but it will also make them not a clear target from shooting across it. And this unit managed to run all the way across, jump over the hedge, and get into close range here of this unit here. So a mixed bag for the Allies, for the KGL. They've got to get on with it because turn 4 these Hussars are going to be turning up, so that's not going to be good news for them if they're not doing well at that point. But over to shooting for turn 1. So in terms of shooting, all of the KGL units are in range of a French unit. Even this unit on the left flank here are just in range of that stand there at 16 inches. So they all get the KGL get 2 shooting dice per unit, and because they are kind of elite skirmishers, they also have the sharpshooter rule, which means they can re-roll 1 missed hit as well. Okay, so let's start over this side. So they're just in range, but that hedge is providing some cover for that French unit there on the end, so they're not a clear target. So what would be 4s is now 5s, so it's two rolls of 5, re-rolling 1 miss. So that's 1 hit and a disorder, and gets re-roll 1. So that's 2 hits. That's a good start for the KGL, so that is they're disordered. 2 saves of 4 required, which they do make. So no casualties, but they are disordered, so that's a good start. This unit on the hill here will fire down at this unit. Now because they're on the hill, they're kind of shooting over the top of that cover, so that's going to mean they're still hitting on 4s. So 2 shots on 4s, re-rolling 1. So 1 hit. Just the 1 hit, and again a save of 4 required. No, so although no disorders, there is a casualty on that unit there. Von Behring, he's going to shoot at this unit here. Now, because he's not in base contact with the hedge, he is shooting across it. So again, his units, the French here, are not a clear target. So once again, there'll be 2 shots hitting on 5s, re-rolling 1. Wow, great shooting. 2 automatic hits there and a disorder. 2 saves of 4 required, which they do make, but again, these guys here are disordered, so it's going to hinder all their movement. And then finally, this unit here is shooting into here again. There's no bonuses for being this close, but it's going to be 4s, two dice and 4s, re-rolling 1. So no hits so far, despite being close. And again, a 6, that is in a disorder, so some good shooting from the KGL across the line here. And then we'll just do the save of 4, which they do make. So not a lot of casualties coming across in that shooting round, but plenty of disorder, and that's going to really hamper the French in terms of their phase, in terms of engaging with these KGL advancing on them. Okay, so let's move over to French turn 1. Okay, so that's the end of French movement, and as you can see, nobody moved, mainly because we've got 3 disordered units there, so they can't move anyway. And the unit that wasn't disordered decided to stay where it was because it's obviously protecting those supplies, and if it moved out, it would leave a nice big gap potentially for one of the KGL units to walk through and get access to those supplies. So just holding the line really at this stage of the game. So might as well straight to shooting. So first off, these are all small units again from the unit rules. So they get 2 shooting dice, but because they're just basic French line troops, they've got no other rules. So it's just 2 dice. So over here, this unit's going to fire at them. Because they're disordered, it's a -1, so that becomes 4s become 5s. So just 2 dice hitting on 5s. That is 1 hit though, and 1 save of 4 required, which they do make. So this unit here is going to fire across at Von Behring. Now because, again, they're behind the hedge, they're getting cover, and because they're disordered, so that's -1 for being disordered, -1 because these are not a clear target, so that becomes a 6s. So 2 6s required. Nothing there. And then these guys here will shoot across at Von Behring as well. These are actually armed with smoothbore muskets, so they've only got a range of 12 compared to the rifle muskets of the KGL, so they can only shoot at Von Behring anyway. And once again, they're not disordered, but they are not a clear target. So this time, 2 dice hitting on 5s. Nothing again, so the French shooting's not going well. And the only other unit that can shoot here is this one, and they can only target Von Behring because these are out of range. So again, 2 shots, but again hitting on 6s because they're disordered and not a clear target. But there it is, we have 1 hit and a disorder. 1 save of 4 for Von Behring's unit. No, so they are injured. So they take their first casualty over here, and they're also disordered. So that's going to hamper them for their turn as well. Okay, so there's no hand-to-hand combat. So that's the end of French turn 1. A little bit of damage back on the KGL, but they're still holding the line. So all this disorder now comes back off. So that one comes off, that one comes off, and that one comes off. And we go straight over to turn 2 for the Allies. So that's the end of movement for the Allies on turn 2. Now the KGL are actually Elite 4+, which basically means they can roll at the start of their turn, and on a 4+ they can remove disorder. And Von Behring managed to get his disorder removed, which is good news. He did try to charge into this unit, but only managed to just get 1 move across the hedge basically. This unit over this side managed to get a successful charge in, and there was no damage or casualties from closing fire. The unit in the centre though, they failed their order, so they're still stuck on the hill. Not sure what they're waiting for, but maybe they're just trying to snipe out a few targets. And then this unit on the left managed to again make 3 moves, get right up across the hedge and over to this unit, towards this unit here. And also trying to think about the Hussars coming on, kind of need a bit of a blocking force at some point down here. So getting them across onto the roadway might be useful for later turns. Okay, so that's the end of turn 2 movement, so we're over to shooting. Okay, so firstly we've got this unit down here, we're going to shoot into there, so just 2 shots, and again hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1 for sharpshooter. So nothing yet, but there's 1 hit and a disorder, so that's again a good start for KGL, and 1 save of 4 required, which they do make. So no casualties, but a disorder coming through. Again, this unit on the hill is still in range of that unit there, so they'll be firing across, so they're again hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1. So there's 1 hit, 2 hits and a disorder, 2 saves of 4 required. So 1 casualty, so that's a disorder and a second casualty. Now that means they are now shaken, so that's the first shaken unit. Now, as I said at the start, because there's no commander on the field per se, there's no one to rally that off, so they will remain shaken for the rest of the game. And then Von Bearing will shoot into this unit here. So again, 2 dice hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1. That's 1 hit and a disorder, and just 1 hit and a save of 4 required. No, so that's a casualty and a disorder onto that unit there. Okay, so that's the end of shooting. So the KGL definitely putting pressure on the French line, these French garrison troops, but we have got 1 hand-to-hand combat over here, so we'll come back to that. Okay, so in terms of hand-to-hand, because they're small units, both the French and the KGL get 4 hand-to-hand dice each. Now the KGL did charge in, so they are getting +1 to their rolls. So normally hitting on 4s, they're going to be hitting on 3s, and the French will be hitting on 4s. So we'll start with the KGL. So 4 dice, hitting on 3s. That is 4 hits. That's a great start for the German troops. And 4 rolls of 4 required for the French. Just 2. Okay, so that is, let's roll for casualties. So there's 2 casualties for, or 2 saves required from the KGL. So 2 rolls of 4. So that's 1 casualty for the KGL. And then 4 rolls of 4 required from the French. And just 1 casualty there as well. So despite the numerical advantage on dice, that's actually a drawn combat. So they're both getting 1 casualty each. So the French get 1 casualty and the KGL get 1 casualty. Now because it's a drawn combat, it just goes on to the next round. However, neither are shaken either, so there's nobody testing for morale. So they're just locked in combat, waiting for the next turn. Okay, so that's the end of hand-to-hand combat. So again, the KGL are putting pressure on. We're into turn 2 now for the French. So once again, there was no movement from the French because the 3 units that could are out all disordered. So we're just going straight to shooting. So this unit here is going to fire with these guys. Now they are disordered, so they're getting 2 dice, but because they're disordered, it's -1. So it's 2 dice hitting on 5s. Nothing there. The unit here will be shooting at Von Bearing's unit. Now, although they're both shaken and disordered, it doesn't stack, so it's still just -1. So again, they're going to be hitting on 5s. That is 1 hit, and 1 save of 4 required from Von Bearing, which he does make. And then this unit here again, that is disordered, will fire across on 5s as well. No, so that disorder is really hampering their shooting. So no damage coming across, so we just go straight across to this hand-to-hand combat here. So once again, it's 4 dice, combat dice each. There's no modifiers now, they're all both hitting on 4s because it's a draw last time. So as it's French turn, we'll start with them. So 4 dice hitting on 4s. So that is 3 hits. I didn't say it before, but 6s in hand-to-hand combat do not disorder, it's only in shooting. So, but that is 3 hits for the French and the KGL. Just the 1 back. Okay, so it's 3 saves for, so 1 save for the French, which they don't make, so that's 1 casualty, and 3 saves of 4 required for the KGL, but they don't make 2, so that's 2 casualties for the KGL. So the French actually won that combat, so let's allocate the casualties out. So that puts them to 2, and they become shaken, and these become 3. They're also shaken because they've both got a morale of 2. Now, because they are 1 over, so basically these have won the combat, the French have won the combat, so the KGL will be testing. Now, because they are 1 over their stamina. It will be 2 dice, but they're going to be -1 for that casualty. So they need to roll high and see what it comes out. 5 becomes a 4. That is really bad news because that means that unit breaks and is destroyed. So that's the first unit destroyed. So despite being the baggage handlers, they've still got bayonets and they still love their country. So that is the end of that KGL unit. So a bit of a blow for the Allies, but that's how brutal hand-to-hand combat can be. So over to turn 3 for the KGL. So that's the end of turn 3 movement for the Allies. So after that mini disaster for the KGL, losing that unit there, von Behring decided to throw caution to the wind. So he tried to get all his units to charge in, but however this unit failed its order. These guys came down off the hill in a heroic charge, screaming from the top of their lungs, jumped over the hedge. Fantastic roll. However, they took a face full of musketry and became shaken. So although they're in combat, they're obviously damaged by that attack. And similarly for von Behring, he charged in and again got a face full of musketry, and unfortunately was also shaken, but also got an additional casualty above their stamina level. So they have to test now for morale. The one bit of good news is the Brunswick reinforcements have arrived, albeit they only got 1 move each onto the board, so not going to have any effect on the battle at this point. But the bad news for von Behring, he's got a test for morale. Now, last time that didn't go well for the KGL. So again, it's 2 dice, -1 for the excess casualty. Let's hope he rolls high. They do. So 9 becomes an 8, so they're okay. So they're going to remain in combat. So we'll just take off this additional casualty back to 2. So that was a bit of a wipe the brow moment for von Behring. So there is a bit of shooting to do, so we'll come back for that. So over here, this unit's going to just shoot here. So again, 2 dice, hitting on 4s, but re-rolling 1 for sharpshooter. And they need it. Nothing there. So the shooting, nothing's happened on that round. So what we have now is 2 hand-to-hand combats. So we'll come back for that. So starting off with this combat here. So now both units are shaken. So the KGL charged in, so they get +1 to their roll. So 4s become 3s. But because they're shaken, they get a -1, so back to 4s. And the French are shaken, so their 4s become 5s. So we'll start with the KGL, so that's 4 hand-to-hand dice hitting on 4s. That's not a great roll, just the 1 hit from them. And 4 rolls of 5 from the French. Nothing at all. So the KGL win that combat. So that's 1 additional casualty for the French, so they will be testing because they lost. So let's do that now. So it's 2 dice and they get -1 for that excess casualty there. So that 9 becomes an 8. So very similar to von Behring, although they lost the combat, they stay in combat there. Okay, but I'll just put this marker here to remind me that they won that combat. So they're stuck there. Now from von Behring, the good news for him, I've used some of the rules from there's in the La Haye-Sainte battle set I bought. Von Behring gets a +2 attacks because he's a commander. So I'm going to use that because I thought it was quite a nice rule for him. So he gets a bonus 2 attacks. So those, so from 4 becomes 6. Now they are shaken and they did charge. So similar to this unit here. So it's a +1, -1. So again, 6 attacks. Hitting on 4s, and the French have got 4 attacks, but they're not shaken or anything, so they're hitting on 4s as well. So we'll do the KGL first. So that's 6 attacks hitting on 4s. So that's 4 hits for KGL. So von Behring making a difference there, and 4 for the French and 2 for the French. So the KGL have 2 saves to make, which they do make, and the French have 4, and then they make 1. So that's 3 casualties for the French. So that puts them up to, so those 2 becomes shaken up to 4. So they're 2 over their stamina limit. So let's just put that shaken marker on there. So they will be testing. So it's 2 dice -2. 6 becomes a 4. So they're destroyed. So that unit does break and runs from the field. So despite all the shenanigans and shaken units, von Behring has finally made a bit of a difference to the battle, and that unit was broken. So, not good news for the French, because that's going to open up a route into those supplies. However, it is their turn 3, so we'll come back for that. That's the end of movement for the French on turn 3. So again, not a lot happened. This unit here did try and get through around into von Behring, but failed his order, so they're just stuck where they are. These are obviously engaged in combat, and because these are shaken, although von Behring's just here, they couldn't charge because shaken units can't charge in black powder. So they're pretty much just where they are, and can't do much about it at the moment. They're just desperately hoping for the hussars to arrive and see if they can save the day. Okay, so over to some shooting. So starting down here, this unit's going to fire in here. So again, 2 shots hitting on 4s. That is 2 hits and a disorder. That's useful. 2 saves of 4 required. No, that's a great round of shooting for that French unit. They've made up for not getting their charge in. So that unit is it's shaken, and it is also disordered. So they're stuck there at the moment. And then over here, this unit again will fire into von Behring, hoping to at least try and disorder them, stop them moving. So 2 shots, but because they're shaken, they're going to be hitting on 5s. But they need that 6. And there it is, they've got it. That's good news. So von Behring is shaken, disordered, which means he won't be moving in his next turn. Now, let's see what they save. So 1 save of 4 required. No, so 1 over stamina as well. So he's also testing morale. This could be even worse for von Behring. So let's do that. These are okay. So there's 2 dice for morale, -1 for being 1 over their stamina, and also -1 for being disordered. So there's 2 dice, -2, and they need to roll high. Right, a 7 becomes a 5, -2. So with a 5, they will be retreating 1 move, and they remain disordered. So that is really bad news for von Behring. He was so close to getting in there, but this musketery fire again has caused him some problems. So we'll move them back and come back for the hand-to-hand combat. So von Behring is now behind the hedgerow here, so having moved backwards and disordered. So we're just going to this hand-to-hand combat here. So let's work this through. So both sides are shaken, both getting 4 dice. So that's -1 to their rolls. So the French are hitting on 5s. But because the KGL won the last combat, they get +1, so they're back to 4s. So we'll do the French first. So 4 dice hitting on 5s. That's 2 hits. And then the KGL 4 on 4s. Just the 1. So that's not particularly good for the KGL. So French get 1 save of 4, which they do make. And KGL need 2. Just the 1. So they're going to be 1 over their stamina again. So they lost that combat, and they will be testing to the dirt now. So it's 2 dice minus the 1 excess casualty. That's a 8 becomes a 7. So they're still locked in combat. But this time the French side won that unit, won that combat. Okay, so that's the end of that turn. Turn 3 is finished. So where do we think we are? So KGL have tried their best to get stuck into these French line, but they've holed out. Even though there's a big gaping hole there, von Behring's now retreated. The Brunswick are making them out the road, but this is turn 4, so the Hussars will be turning up on turn 4. So let's see what the Allies can do in their turn. So that's the end of turn 4 movement for the Allies. Pretty good turn. Firstly, this unit here, because of the KGL Elite 4+, managed to remove its disorder and then managed to get 2 moves off to come round and get into contact with the supplies. Now, because they weren't in contact at the start of the turn, they can't start setting the fuses yet, but at least they are in base contact, which gives them a chance maybe next turn. The Brunswickers, this unit failed to move, and this unit only moved once, so they're not really adding much to the battle at the moment. So these reinforcements aren't really adding much, but making some slow progress. And then von Behring again removed his disorder on a 6, which was good news, and then decided, because this unit had got into base contact there, he would just see if he could rally off a casualty, which he successfully did, so got rid of that shaken as well. So put themselves in a decent position now in turn 4, so let's see what they can do in shooting. So starting with von Behring himself, so they're going to be shooting across at this unit here. So because they're in contact with the hedgerow, there's no penalty for the hedge in that respect. So it's just 2 shots hitting on 4s, and again re-rolling 1 for sharpshooter. So that is 1 and a disorder. Re-roll this one. 2 hits, 2 4s required, saves. Notice that is 1 excess casualty, and they are also disordered. And then this unit of Brunswick can shoot in here. So again, they've got 2 shooting dice, and they're also sharpshooter. So they get to re-roll 1. That's 1 hit, it's already disordered. Just the 1, and again another save of 4 required, which they do make. So, but they will be testing, so we'll do that now. So they're -1 for 1 excess casualty, -1 for the disorder, so it's 2 dice, -2. That 6 becomes a 4. Oh dear, that's another French unit gone, so they are destroyed. Okay, so we'll just remove them out of the battlefield. So that's a big gaping hole now appeared in the French line. This could be bad news for the French now, but let's see what happens in hand-to-hand. So back to this ongoing melee. So the French won the last combat round. So because of that, although they're shaken, because they won the last combat round, it's kind of +1, -1, so they'll be hitting on 4s. And because the KGL are shaken, they'll be hitting on 5s. So we'll do the KGL first because it's their turn. So 4 dice hitting on 5s. Just the 1 hit. And then 4 dice hitting on 4 for the French. That's 3 hits. That's pretty good. Okay, so we'll do the saves for the KGL on 4s. That's 2 casualties. That's not a good start. And then 1 save of 4 for the, and 1 for the French. So the French win that again by 1. So 2 to 1. So we'll apply those casualties. Well, because they won the combat, there's no problem there. There's 2 casualties over on here. So we'll do that now. So it's 2 dice -2. So that 2 becomes a 6. So again, these will be retreating 1 move and become disordered. So we'll do that, and then we'll go over to French turn 4. And I can hear the sound of hooves in the distance. Let's see what goes on. So that's the end of a pretty epic and triumphant turn 4 movement phase for the French. The gallant hussars both came on, and both got exceptional rolls for 3 moves with the charge. So this unit that's up here charged into the KGL unit that was around the supplies here. Now they chose to evade because they are skirmishers. They chose to try and evade the attack because they were already shaken as well. However, they didn't roll far enough, and because the hussars had 3 moves, they managed to follow up and slaughter the evading skirmishers to a man. So that unit was destroyed. So possibly not, maybe might have been better just to take the charge, but anyway, we are where we are, so they say. So seeing that, this unit here also got 3 moves and a charge move off into von Behring's unit, who, having seen his comrades fail in their evasion, just decided to take the charge. So that's a combat that will be in the next round, and also because he's got his +2 combat dice, felt it might have a better opportunity at holding that attack off. And the other movement was the unit that was just here has moved around now to fill that gap and just protect those supplies there. So the French have put themselves in a very strong position now with the arrival of their cavalry. So we'll move over to shooting. Okay, so this unit, shaken unit here, is going to fire across into these guys who are in cover behind the hedge. So they're going to be -1 for shaken, -1 because he's not on a clear target. So that's going to be 2 dice hitting on 6s. Nothing there. And similarly here, this unit's going to fire across into them as well. So they're okay, that's there, but they're still not a clear target, so it's 2 dice hitting on 5s. Just the 1 hit. They're already disordered, so that doesn't matter. And 1 save of 3 because they'll be on the hedge. Fine, so no more casualties there. So that's the end of the shooting phase, so we'll come over to the combat. Okay guys, so over to this combat. So you'll have seen on the screen, I did a note earlier that I'm ignoring the skirmisher penalty for hand-to-hand combat because they're effectively all these units are in kind of skirmish mode, even the cavalry. However, the French get 4 attacks for being a small unit, and they did charge in, so they're getting +1 to their attack, so hitting on 3s. And the KGL get 4 attacks plus the 2 bonus attacks for von Behring, so they're getting 6 attacks back, and they're going to be hitting on 4s. Let's see how they get on. So 4 attacks for the French, hitting on 3s. Oh, that's a pathetic roll So they must have blown their horses while they were charging in all that way. So just the 1 hit from the French, and 6 attacks back of 4 from von Behring's unit. Not too bad. That's 3. So 3 hits from the KGL. So we'll do the save for the French. So 3 saves of 4. Oops, knocked the supplies over. So that's 1 casualty for the French. And then 1 save of 3 because they are behind the hedge at the moment, which they do make. So that's just 1 casualty on the French. So the French did lose that combat. So there's some consolation there for the KGL. So these guys will be testing, so we might as well do that straight away. So 2 dice, but no modifiers. And that's a 7, so they are, I think they're still in combat. I'll just double check that. I'll just come back. No, I'm glad I checked that, and this is one of the reasons I'm running these small skirmish games. It gives me a chance to practice the rules of black powder as well. So, interestingly, cavalry, even though they rolled a 7, infantry would normally stay in hand-to-hand combat. The cavalry unit has to retire 1 move. Now, the way it's worded is if it retires 1 move, it's fine. If it can't comply, it has to move back 2 moves and then becomes disordered. But it could move back that 1 move, so they're just back there now. So, not a bad result for the KGL considering what's been since the Hussars have come on and pretty much cleared the board up the road there. Okay, so over to turn 5 for the Allies. Okay, so that's the end of turn 5 movement for the Allies. So tactically, von Behring's been trying to think what he can do here. He's still got to try and get these supplies destroyed. So first off, the Brunswick unit that was at the front there managed to get a charge off into this unit here. They did get some closing fire, but no casualties. And then he just moved these Brunswickers up here just to try and get a little bit closer to the action. And obviously they're going to be shooting at these Hussars at some point. But then it was a decision about the 2 units he's got here. He did think about trying to hop over the fence and charge, but this unit was shaken. It did manage to move its disorder again with the elite +4. They rolled a 5. So he decided in the end just to rally that casualty off. So he's got 2 fresher units. And I think for this turn, he's just going to try and pour some musketry fire down into this unit here because they are shaken. So let's see if we can get them to test and potentially break. And then that might open some opportunities then for the next turn to get over the hedge and into the barrels or those supplies there. So trying to think a little bit, there's 3 turns to go, so there's no need to panic. And let's see if we can get some more casualties going. So over to turn 5 shooting for the Allies. So starting off down here, so both of these units are going to fire into this unit here, but we'll start with the one at the bottom. So again, 2 dice hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1 for sharpshooter. That's 1 hit and a disorder. Just still the 1 hit, 1 save of 4 required. No, so that is 1 casualty. So already they're going to be testing. Let's see if von Behring can make a difference as well. So again, 2 shots hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1 for sharpshooter. That's 1 hit, just the 1 hit, and again a save of 4 required, which they do make. So, but they will be testing, so we'll do that now. So 2 dice, -1 for excess casualty. But that's a huge roll, so they're fine. So they're just going to stay where they are. Hang it in there. And then we've got this shooting up here. I'll just come across for that. So once again, it's 2 shots into here on 4s, and they're again sharpshooters. So re-rolling 1. That is 2 misses. That's 1 hit, and again a 4 to save, which they do make. Okay, so that's the end of the shooting. So we'll move over to this combat here. Okay, so the Brunswick Jaegers will fight first. So they're charged in, so they're getting +1. So 4 dice hitting on 3s. So that is 2 hits. And then the French get 4 dice hitting on 4s. That's also 2 hits. So 2 saves for the Brunswick for 4. That's 1 casualty for them. 2 saves of 4 for the French. 1 casualty for them. So that is a drawn combat. They've both got 1 casualty from that melee. So I'll just put that on there. Put that one on here. Okay, so that's a drawn combat. So because none of them are shaken, there's no testing. So that's the end of the Allies' turn. So, by the way, I did add the disorder back on here. So, and also I picked up that they would have had another -1 for their roll for the break test, but because they rolled 11, it was 10, so that would have been 9, so they were still fine anyway, so that's okay. So, yeah, it's moving over to turn 5 for the French, but it's very tight, this game. Let's see how we get on. So that's the end of turn 5 movement for the French. Not quite as epic as the last turn, with the Hussars arrived. I think these guys here, their horses are definitely blown because they failed their order, so they're just stuck there, pausing for breath. This unit here that fought with von Behring in the last round was umming and ahhing about what to do, but they decided, with the fact that these guys are still in cover with a bit of protection, and also von Behring's got his +2 attacks, they decided to just see if they could charge into the flank of the Brunswick here, which they managed to do. So that's going to hopefully turn the tide of that little skirmish battle there. And of course these are disorders, so they couldn't move. So we've got 1 bit of shooting for this unit here, so we'll come back for that. So this unit's shooting across this unit here, so they are shaken and disordered, and also these aren't a clear target, so it's 2 shots hitting on 6s. No, that's it. So back for this combat over here. So this is slightly a complicated arrangement. So what we've got here is, because it was a drawn combat last time, the French here are going to be hitting on 4s. They've got 4 dice hitting on 4s with that infantry unit. Now the Brunswickers can allocate, they've been hit to their flank, so they can allocate up to half their attacks to that flank, which they're going to do. So they're going to put 2 attacks into the infantry and 2 attacks into the cavalry. They're all at -1 because they've been attacked to a flank, so all of those attacks are at -1. So they'll be hitting on 5s. And then the French have charged in with the cavalry, so they're getting 4 attacks hitting on 3s. So we'll do the French first. So we've got the 4 attacks from the infantry, so these are hitting on 4s. Wow, that's excellent. So that's 4 hits for the infantry. And then the cavalry have got 4 attacks on 3s. Another 3, so that's 7 hits onto the Brunswick unit, and they strike back. So we'll do the 2 onto the infantry on 5s. That's 1 on the infantry, and the same again for the cavalry. 2. Okay, so 2 hits back on the cav. So we'll do the cavalry saves first. So 2, 4, 6. Just a reminder how many I've got to do for the KGL first. So 7. Okay, so these are the 1 save for the infantry on a 4, which they make, and 2 saves for the cavalry. Just 1. So the 1 casualty coming across. So that actually does shake that unit there. Okay, and then the Brunswick have got 7 saves to make. So I will roll another couple of dice here. So let's do that. So these are all on 4s. Actually, pretty good roll, isn't it? That's good. So 2 casualties. So actually, they did lose the combat, but only by 1. So that was quite good. So 2 casualties there. That does put them up to 3, though. So they are also shaken and also over their stamina level. So they lost the combat. And they will be testing. So that is so 2 dice and -1. So we'll do that now. So that 7 becomes a 6, so they will be retreating and will be disordered. I'll come back for that. So just an end of turn summary really. So the Brunswick unit retired. The French commander did have a think about whether to follow up and re-engage, but actually thought it better to try and just reform the line here with the Hussars, who are shaken, but just trying to protect these supplies as much as possible. And so moving up here would have kind of again opened this up for some opportunities for the KGL to get through. So yeah, just reform the line and just saying come on and see what you can do. So over to turn 6. So that's the end of turn 6 movement for the Allies. Not great really. There's only 1 turn to go. So I don't think they're going to have an opportunity to destroy the supplies, because basically they are still intact. And they need to be in base contact at the start of the turn to be able to light the fuses. And they both failed their charges down here. Well, von Behring only got over the hedge. These guys failed their order. So the idea was to try and see if they can engage with these infantry, break them, and then sweep in advance into the supplies ready for next turn. That's not going to happen, so there's no way they can actually destroy the supplies. The Brunswick also failed their order, so the only way they can really win is to destroy all the units. Again, that's going to be really tough, but we'll give it this shooting phase and just see what the result of that is, and then let's see if that gives them any opportunity for a win in this game. So we'll come back for shooting. Okay, so start down here. So von Behring's going to fire into those hussars. So it's going to be 2 shots, hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1 for the sharpshooter. That's 1 and a disorder, just the 1 hit. So put the disorder on them. That is partly useful, and then need them to fail this so they can at least have a go at testing. No, they make it, so there's no casualty. Then again, this one will fire across this unit. So again, 2 dice on 4s, we're rolling 1 for sharpshooter. Both hit, 2 saves of 4 required. That's the casualty they needed, so they're going to be 1 over their stamina, so might as well test those now. So -1. So an 8 becomes a 7, so they're fine. And then we'll go over to the Brunswick. So this unit here is going to shoot in. Again, 2 shots in on 4s, and we're rolling 1 for a sharpshooter. That's 1. That's 2 hits, 2 saves of 4 required. No, so that did shake them, so that's interesting. So can they get 1 more casualty on this unit? Let's see. So the other unit here, this shaken and disordered will fire, so they're going to be hitting on 5s. Re-rolling 1. No, so just shaken there. So that's the end of the shooting phase. There's no other, there's no hand-to-hand combat, so we'll move over to French turn 6. So that's the end of movement on turn 6 for the French. So all that happened was this hussar unit moved back into here just to close the lines again. These are obviously disordered, and also they were shaken, so they couldn't charge in anyway. So yeah, that's it. Bit of shooting. We'll come back for that. So these are firing across here. So again, that's on a 6 because they're shaken and they're not a clear target. That's the 1 in a disorder, and 1 save of 3 because they're behind cover, which they make, but they are disordered. And then this unit here will fire at von Behring, so 2 shots on 4s. That's 2 misses. Okay, so that's the end of shooting. There's no hand-to-hand, so we'll come back for turn 7. Okay, so that's the end of movement for the Allies on turn 7. This is it. This is their final opportunity to try and do something in this game. They can still get the victory, but they've got to destroy all the units that are left now. So it's going to be a very, very tall ask. The Brunswick finally decided to move, so a little bit late really, but they've both managed to get up to here. This unit's managed to recover its disorder, and von Behring just piled into these guys. Took a casualty on the way in, he's shaken, however, might be able to break those in hand to hand. So this is it now, let's see how we get on. So we'll come back for shooting. So from the top, so this Brunswick unit is going to fire across into this shaken unit. So again, trying to get them to test. So 2 shots, hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1 for sharpshooter. There's the 2 hits they need. I'll put the disorder on, but it's not going to really matter that much now. So they need 2 saves of 4. They do make it. So that is going to be the end of the game. I will just go through the rest of the shooting just to finish us off. So these 2 will fire. These are just going to fire into these. I'll just do that on 4s. Yeah, and 2 4s as well. So they were shaken, but they're fine. And then these guys onto the hussars. And it's just the 1 hit and re-roll. 2 saves. No, so they would be testing. So they would have actually tested, and then the close combat. So yeah, that's the end of the game. The French have held out. They can't be broken now. They can't lose the game. The Allies tried their best. It was a real melee in the end. It was great having some cavalry on the table. So I'll just come and do an end of game summary and wrap up. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed that game. It certainly was interesting, lots going on. Really nice to have some cavalry on the table, having some new units to use. I thought at one point that the Allies were going to break through and it would be quite easy, but as soon as those cavalry arrived, it just changed the game really, and things just were just too difficult for them in the end. I'll be interested in anybody's comments on the game itself, because obviously I'm kind of making these scenarios up for each game, and I thought it was fairly balanced. I thought it was quite. The Allies really had to try and get in there quite early to sort these supplies out, and but the French line just managed to hold out despite all these elite units approaching. I think what didn't help was the Brunswick really didn't contribute to the game at all in the crucial part at the start. So if they didn't manage to roll a little bit better and get further into the battle earlier in that first turn they arrived in the second turn, that could have been the difference. But I think once the Hussars arrived and the Brunswick were kind of up here, really the game was over. I couldn't see a way of the KGL breaking through without some really miracle rolls, really. So, but yeah, it was an enjoyable game, really good. So the French get a major victory. So what I'll do now, I'll go over to the campaign summary and we'll see what effect that has for the overall campaign. Okay guys, so this is the campaign summary after game 3. So if you watched the previous 2 games, you'll have seen this spreadsheet before. It's a very simple campaign system. So basically on the right, I'm just recording the victories. So today's major victory I've added in there. So the French have now got a major victory, a minor victory and a loss. And the Anglo-Wise have got 1 major victory and 2 losses. And then when it comes to when the campaign's finished, we can use these credits and kind of penalties on this chart here. And basically this is applied to units in the main force for the big battle at the end. And very quickly, the victory credits are, if you get a major victory, you can choose any of these. And basically you can't apply them to any already elite units. So for example, your Imperial Guard or the 95th Rifles, because they're already elite units. So these can only be applied really to line regiments, to artillery, to cavalry. But for a major victory, you can basically choose one. So for example, both the Anglo-Allies and the French now can choose one of these for one of their units. So for example, I might want to choose, I think I've said it a few times now, maybe Ferocious Charge for one of my Highland units, which would be very nice. So you can just choose. And for a minor victory, so the French have got one of those, you just roll a d6 and it's kind of randomised and you apply it on there. And again, for the loss penalties, you roll a d6 and you add this to some of your units. So at the moment, the Anglo-Allies are going to be adding a couple of penalties on there. So they need to step up a little bit. So that's the end of the campaign summary for Game 3. So again, hope you enjoyed it, guys. Game 4 will be coming up very soon. So once again, keep yourself safe and thanks for watching.